Have you ever pondered just how near you are to the brink of moral collapse? You see, there exists a boundary that separates a courteous, virtuous individual from a deranged creature willing to cast aside all ethical norms. Picture this. You're comfortably seated or reclining, quietly watching this video, when suddenly the conventions of decency vanish. Would you continue to see yourself as the innocent, goody two-shoes you believe you are? Or would you discard every moral standard you once held dear? At one point, I discovered a book that shook me to my core, The Lucifer Effect by Philip Zimbardo. This work doesn't merely inquire why decent people turn malevolent. It slams you with a brutal truth. So join me on a journey through the dark, twisted maze of the human mind. You, dear viewer, like to think of yourself as a good person? Perhaps you return lost wallets, assist elderly neighbors in crossing the street, donate to charity, or volunteer at an animal shelter on weekends. Yet let's be honest. Have you ever taken something that wasn't yours simply because you were sure you wouldn't be caught? A pen from the office, a neighbor's unsecured Wi-Fi password, or even a fork from the cafeteria. I'm not here to shame you, but to underline what the author makes unmistakably clear. Evil isn't some remote, abstract force. Rather, it's a treacherous descent that begins with minor, seemingly insignificant transgressions. Consider the story of Chip Frederick, a name you might not know, yet his tale deserves attention. Frederick started out as an ordinary American boy who adored baseball and his mother's apple pie. But later he became a guard at the notorious Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, where inmates were subjected to brutal torture. The twist? Before his assignment, Frederick was simply an average guy, with a normal IQ, sound mental health, and a genuine love for his country. However, his time at Abu Ghraib transformed him into something repulsive, a man who renounced every moral principle and personally inflicted pain. If you believe you're any different, prepare for a rude awakening. The reality is that the line between good and evil is far more blurred than you might care to admit. You may cling to the comforting belief that you are inherently good, that your nature is as fixed as a star in the night sky. But let me shatter that illusion. The idea that your character is immutable, that who you are remains constant in every circumstance, is nothing but fiction. You are not chiseled in stone. You are inscribed in sand, continuously reshaped by the ebb and flow of your environment. Think about how you behave among friends compared to your demeanor when interacting with a child. Are you truly the same person in both scenarios? Naturally not. Now let's extend this thought experiment further. Picture yourself as a participant in the Milgram Experiment, a disturbingly cultish study of human behavior. You assume the role of a teacher, required to administer electric shocks to a learner every time they make an error. The shocks begin at a low level, but before you know it, they escalate to a perilous 450 volts. Despite the learner's screams and desperate pleas to stop, you continue. And why? Simply because the man in the white lab coat overseeing the experiment ordered you to. Under such conditions, an astonishing 65% of participants, ordinary people like you, administered the maximum shock to individuals they'd never met. They weren't born sadists. They were regular folks succumbing to the pressures of the situation and the authority figure commanding them. Zimbardo's findings leave no doubt. In the right, or rather the wrong circumstances, any one of you could transform into a ruthless instrument. And if you're still with me, let's delve into something even darker. Zimbardo didn't just discuss these phenomena. He brought them to life by conducting one of the most infamous psychological experiments in history, the Stanford Prison Experiment. Imagine this: 24 college students, all well-groomed, middle-class, and mentally stable, are placed in a simulated prison environment. They are randomly divided, half become guards, the other half prisoners. The guards are given uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses that obscure their eyes, and by extension, their humanity. Meanwhile, the prisoners are forced to strip, hose down, and assign numbers instead of names. It wasn't long before the psychological theater descended into a full-blown nightmare. The guards, ostensibly normal, decent men, began to revel in their power. They forced prisoners to urinate into buckets, stripped them of their clothes, and confined them in dark cells as punishment. One guard even earned the nickname John Wayne for his particularly brutal methods. And all of this unraveled in just 6 days. 6 days before the experiment was terminated. Under certain conditions, your morality can crumble faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. I know you believe you'd act differently in such circumstances, but the truth is, you really don't know, do you? So what tips the scales one way or the other? Why do individuals like Frederick or the Stanford Guards lose their moral compass while others remain sane? Zimbardo points to one particularly insidious ingredient in the recipe for evil: obedience to authority, whether it's a person, an institution, or a set of rules. Authority can compel even the most virtuous among you to commit inhumane acts. Let's revisit the Milgram experiment. Its participants weren't inherently evil. They were merely following orders, under the impression that they were contributing to a greater good. This obedience didn't originate with Milgram, nor did it cease there. Consider the Jonestown Massacre as further evidence. Jim Jones, a charismatic leader who once championed utopian ideals, gradually morphed into a tyrant. His followers, trusting and obedient, never saw the transformation coming. That day, over 900 people died, not because they were inherently evil, but because they followed orders. Here's a question for you. How often do you comply with an order not because it's right, but because it's the easier path? How often do you challenge the authorities in your life instead of assuming they're always correct? Perhaps it's time to start asking these uncomfortable questions before you find yourself mired in the quicksand of moral decay. But it isn't solely about authority, is it? There's another treacherous companion on the journey to malevolence: the erosion of personal responsibility. Picture this scenario. You're taking part in the Milgram experiment, and tension mounts as the learner in the next room cries out in pain. Yet you feel reassured. The man in the white lab coat promised to take full responsibility. So if something goes wrong, it isn't truly your fault. This phenomenon, known as de-individuation, is a perilously slippery slope. It's why rioters wear masks, soldiers don uniforms, and internet trolls hide behind anonymous profiles. Once you believe your actions can't be traced back to you, shedding the constraints of morality becomes alarmingly easy. Zimbardo once left an abandoned car in the Bronx, a crime-ridden area, and within hours it was stripped and vandalized. Yet in another neighborhood, where people are more likely to know each other, the same car remained untouched, almost invisible. This stark contrast reminds us that when anonymity prevails and responsibility is diffused, evil finds an ideal ground to flourish. How many of you, hiding behind your screens, have done or said things online that you'd never dare to attempt face-to-face? It's easy to disappear into the background, to become someone else when no one's watching. But is that alter ego someone you'd want to confront in the mirror? And then there's dehumanization, the final nail in the coffin of empathy. How do you get someone to commit atrocities against their fellow humans? Simple. Convince them that those they harm aren't truly human. This psychological trick has been used to justify some of history's worst crimes. Reflect on Albert Bandura's chilling study at Stanford, where students were instructed to control and punish another group based on their decisions. Here's the catch. The punishers were told something about one group. They were informed that these individuals weren't white and fluffy, but were in fact dehumanized. This warped logic underpinned the Nazis' portrayal of Jews as subhuman, the Rwandan genocide's depiction of Tutsis as cockroaches, and the unspeakable cruelty of Japanese soldiers toward Chinese civilians. You might like to think such dehumanization is confined to a distant past or to the hearts of other evil people. Yet look around you today. How often do you hear people labeled as animals, scum, or parasites? Once such labels are attached, it becomes all too easy to ignore suffering and justify cruelty. And here's the chilling truth. The moment you stop seeing someone as fully human, you unlock the door to your own dark potential. But wait, there's more. As the saying goes, words can be weapons, and when used skillfully, they can obscure even the most horrific abuses. Enter the realm of euphemisms, a sanitized vocabulary that transforms torture into enhanced interrogation and genocide into ethnic cleansing. This linguistic sleight of hand is morally akin to sweeping bloody crumbs under a rug. Zimbardo examines how euphemisms and carefully crafted ideologies serve as cover for atrocities, allowing perpetrators to sleep peacefully at night. But let's return to the Milgram experiment. Participants were led to believe they were advancing science, even enhancing memory, when in truth they were inflicting genuine pain on another person. They thought they were doing something good, something necessary. The U.S. invasion of Iraq and the subsequent torture at Abu Ghraib were not presented as atrocities. They were framed as necessary measures in the war on terrorism, a necessary evil to protect national security. Soldiers operating under this ideological cover saw themselves as heroes, even as they committed acts the world would later condemn. This is a bleak reminder that when narratives are twisted and language is softened, evil inevitably follows. It may be rationalized, it may be disguised, but it remains evil nonetheless. So ask yourself, who is manipulating words to make something vile sound virtuous? What is really happening beneath that polished rhetoric? But let's not succumb to despair just yet. If there's one lesson Zimbardo's journey into the dark corners of the human mind imparts, it's that we still have a choice. You might be treading a precarious tightrope over an abyss, but that doesn't condemn you to fall. The capacity for evil may reside within you, yet so does the power for heroism. So, what does it take to resist the pull of darkness and steer yourself toward moral behavior? The answer lies in personal accountability. It's about making your own choices, even when circumstances allow you to hide behind anonymity or the influence of authority. In the Milgram experiment, some participants, despite immense pressure, chose to stop. They took responsibility for their actions, even when no one else did. This reminds us that the ability to resist isn't innate. It's a decision made moment by moment, circumstance by circumstance. Yet here's the crucial point. You must remain vigilant. You need to be ready to stand up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when everyone else remains passive. And that, my friends, is what distinguishes a potential hero from a potential monster. So how do you counter the lure of authority when it leads you down a dark path? The solution might seem simple, but in practice, it's anything but. You must question authority. Yes, my friends, question everything. Just because someone dons a uniform, holds a title, or speaks confidently does not mean they are infallible. Zimbardo's work repeatedly demonstrates that when unchecked, those in power can drive well-intentioned individuals to commit terrible acts. It's all too easy to fall into the trap of believing that authority figures always know best, that they act in your best interest. Yet history is rife with atrocities committed by those who blindly followed orders. From the heart-rending obedience in the Milgram experiment to the uncritical allegiance that culminated in the Jonestown massacre. Unchecked authority can be a dangerous guide. But you are not powerless. You have a voice. You have the right to say no, to step back, and to resist. So the next time someone instructs you to do something that conflicts with your conscience, pause, reflect, ask the difficult questions. That is the difference between being a mindless follower and being a hero. Amidst all this talk of evil, there's another side, the heroes. These are the individuals who choose to act boldly when others are paralyzed by fear or blind obedience. Zimbardo doesn't leave us wallowing in despair. He offers us a way out, a path to goodness, and it all begins with action. What sets a hero apart isn't superhuman strength or unshakable confidence. It's the willingness to act when others stand by. Consider the tale of Wesley Autry, the unsung hero of the New York City subway. When a man suffering a seizure fell onto the tracks, Autry didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for someone else to take charge. He leaped in, risking his own life to save a stranger. That is the essence of heroism, not grand gestures on a battlefield, but simple, decisive actions in everyday life. It's about refusing to pass the buck, about choosing the righteous path even when it terrifies you. Heroism isn't reserved for extraordinary individuals. It's a choice you must make every day. And this brings us to the most unsettling truth Zimbardo drives home. Each one of us harbors within ourselves the seeds of both good and evil. We are living contradictions, capable of both noble acts of heroism and base acts of cruelty. The choice between these extremes isn't a one-time event. It's a constant struggle, a daily battle. One moment, you might be a hero. The next, under the right conditions, you could become a villain. Zimbardo implores us to acknowledge this internal duality, to understand that the potential for evil isn't confined to some distant, backward place. It resides within every one of us. This isn't a call to despair, but rather a call to vigilance. By recognizing this duality and accepting that you have the capacity for both good and evil, you become better equipped to manage your actions and choose in alignment with your higher nature. It isn't about fearing who you might become. It's about choosing who you want to be every single day. And as we near the end of this exploration, remember that the line between good and evil is not just an abstract philosophical concept. It's a practical, everyday reality. Zimbardo's research reminds us that this boundary can shift and blur, depending on the choices we make and the situations we face. But here's the point. Understanding this gives you a power many lack. You're not merely another face in the crowd, blindly following orders or succumbing to peer pressure. You're aware of the forces that can lead you astray, and with that awareness comes responsibility. You have the power to resist, to act, to be the hero in your own story. And this isn't just a lofty ideal. It's a necessity in a world where moral boundaries are constantly tested, where authority and societal pressures can nudge you toward evil. Awareness of these forces equips you with the tools to push back. So which side are you on? Are you ready to choose the light when darkness encroaches? Are you prepared to be the one who acts when others hesitate? Because in the end, it isn't merely about evading evil, it's about actively choosing goodness. To sum up, The Lucifer Effect isn't just a book about the dark side of human nature. It's a call, a challenge to confront the potential for evil within ourselves and to make a conscious choice for good. The situations you encounter will test you, pushing you to that threshold where good and evil blur. Yet it is in these moments of trial that your true character is revealed. Remember the lessons? Obedience to authority, the loss of personal responsibility, dehumanization, and the seductive power of euphemisms all can steer you toward a dark path. But also remember that within you lies the power to resist, to question, and to act heroically, even when the odds are stacked against you. You don't need a cape or superpowers to be a hero. You need the courage to act, to choose light over darkness every day. And that, my friends, is what will ultimately make all the difference. It isn't easy, and the path isn't always clear, but it's essential. In the end, the story of your life isn't written by the situations you face, it's written by how you respond to them. So choose wisely. Be the hero, not the monster. And when you find yourself at that moral crossroads, as we all eventually will, take a deep breath, look within, and remember the lessons we've explored today. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and until next time, keep questioning, keep striving, and keep choosing the light.